Keep Right with Ralph K. Ginorio. Educational malpractice. Like farmers after bringing in a successful harvest, teachers like me take great satisfaction in having helped convey something of value to another cohort of students. Unfortunately, any genuine teacher must temper our sense of satisfaction with a growing sense of alarm. While many of us are still able to authentically practice our vocation, such opportunities are made increasingly despite the educational establishment rather than because of it. This educational establishment consists of pedagogical philosophers, psychologists, social scientists, collegiate teacher certification programs, state school bureaucracies, and the credulous legislators. We've empowered all of them. Together with their disciples in countless school districts, these experts constitute a governing consensus that determines what is thought possible for schools. Many innovators who have created insights or creative insights on how we can improve teaching and learning do not belong to this establishment, but all of them have to cooperate with this set of experts if they wish to turn their ideals into practical reality. Remember, these are the same professionals who have led schools to their current sorry state. This is why, no matter how earnestly reformers pursue solutions, nothing in our school system really ever improves. It is as if a restaurateur who was eager to replace his breakfast diner with an upscale Italian bistro had given all of his new recipes to the very same short-order cooks who had always hurled hash in his greasy spoon's kitchen. Without new chefs, the new food will be the same as the old food in basic ways. Members of this educational establishment have precious little to do with teaching actual students. They are like architects who craft unprecedented utopian concepts into new models of building design, while never dirtying their own hands by digging earth with a shovel. Consider the fruits of over a half a century of schools dominated by this establishment's ideas. Certified teachers versus expert teachers. Instead of attracting experts from other fields to become teachers, certification requirements bar people with real-world experience from classrooms. Certification programs versus apprenticeships. Instead of focusing on giving would-be teachers actual classroom experience, years are wasted in the fruitless study of pseudo-scientific education theories. Deconstructing versus acculturating. Instead of inviting young people to become productive members of our society, students are being propagandized to hate and overthrow it. Multiculturalism versus the melting pot. Instead of bringing the children of immigrants from all over the world into our shared mainstream American variant of Western civilization, students are taught to take pride only in their cultural separateness and to disdain those who embrace the mainstream. Theory versus practical experience. Instead of prizing diverse real-world experiences, teachers and students are both encouraged to instead value abstract and utopian theory. Data-driven planning versus practical management. Instead of focusing on managing school matters with a minimum of fuss, educational planning must increasingly be justified by reams of questionable social science data. Visionary administrators versus empowered expert teachers. Instead of encouraging expert teachers to design their best lessons, power is being shifted to school and district administration to bring all whom they control into conformity with their own ideas of perfection. The Common Core by any other name versus local control. Instead of maintaining our American tradition of local autonomy to prevent a federalized education system, which would be a danger to free people everywhere, all school curricula are increasingly dictated by central authorities like the Federal Department of Education and the Advanced Placement Programs College Board. Collaborative learning versus lecture. Instead of teachers imparting knowledge effectively through direct instruction, that's lecture, increasingly indirect means intended to trick unmotivated students into learning are being mandated. Social and emotional learning versus discipline. Instead of preparing young people for the rigors of independent life and employment by enforcing strict but reasonable behavior standards designed to encourage the development of self-control, students are being coddled and infantilized in order to avoid conflict and perpetuate their dependency. Student-run classrooms versus teacher-directed classrooms. Instead of working with teachers to ensure that classrooms are effective places of instruction, administrators increasingly undermine hierarchy in favor of some effigy of democracy where the most aggressive students inevitably set the tone. Student-centered assessments versus formal objective testing. Instead of directly testing a student's understanding of the material in a manner that is authentic to the lessons they received, assessment is being altered to match various individual student learning styles. Common assessments versus teacher-produced tests. Instead of expert teachers crafting tests that optimally match the instruction about the curriculum that was actually delivered by them, teachers are being grouped into little committees to come up with lowest common denominator tests that match the material about which the group can agree is important. Group projects versus individual achievement. Instead of allowing students to clearly demonstrate individual excellence, students are forced into situations where group dynamics dictate quality work or the lack thereof. Heterogeneous grouping versus self-tracking or ability tracking. Instead of teaching students who have similar interests and abilities in groups together, teachers and students are being forced into classrooms where both the most dedicated scholars and the most unmotivated troublemakers are taught simultaneously together. It is impossible for a teacher to be all things to all kinds of students at the same time. The cat's getting frisky. Open classrooms versus compartmentalized classrooms. Instead of establishing separate and distinct learning areas for different topics to be taught without mutual interference, many schools have broken down barriers to create a chaotic and cacophonous common learning zone. Diversity, equity, and inclusion versus meritocracy. Instead of inspiring all students of every background to be ambitious and learn to earn success, students are being told that because of their birth characteristics, they have no hopes of succeeding on their own merits. This is one of the most poisonous things that a jaded adult can say to an innocent child. Teachers' unions versus accountable teachers. Instead of teachers being accountable for their practices and successes with students, teachers' unions and school boards negotiate contracts and remedial actions against incompetent teachers collectively. Good teachers should be rewarded and bad teachers should be fired. Test scores versus the well-rounded student. Instead of encouraging the development of the student as a whole human being, students' success has been increasingly determined solely by standardized test scores ever since the No Child Left Behind law was passed back in 2002. Central coordination versus expert teacher autonomy. Instead of permitting teachers who are experts in their field to design and teach courses under administrative and board oversight, central direction is forcing compliance with someone else's master plan. Special needs focus versus general education focus. Instead of focusing most of our energy on meeting the needs of most of our students, mainline educators are increasingly forced to spend more and more of our effort on small groups of students with extraordinary needs. To be clear, those needs need to be addressed, but by specialists, primarily by specialists, not by mainline teachers who are dealing with every other problem at the same time that I have already just mentioned. Unrestrained technophilia versus building personal skills. Instead of developing a student's capacities to effectively function while unplugged, which is God, it's important. Schools mandate the use of ever more intrusive technologies to keep with the times. Social sciences versus history. In my own personal field of endeavor, instead of focusing on the history of our shared Western civilization, schools now provide a shallow and superficial study of global studies and the social sciences. At least most schools do. In fact, I've had administrators ask me, what is the purpose of learning history anyway? They don't know, or they don't care that without history, our society develops amnesia, and we no longer remember who we are, what our values are, and what holds us together. Not that that would ever happen in reality. Indoctrination versus education. All of this leads to students being taught what to believe more than how to reason on their own and work out their own personal conclusions. The only way to fix broken schools is to utterly replace them with new schools built from the ground up by people who are not tainted by the arrogance and errors of the current educational establishment. Eliminate the programs and the professionals that have taken schools so far off mission, and invite a new set of educators to experiment with reforming almost everything in schools. Let the charter school movement be our guide and allow parents and students to freely choose between a variety of school models being experimented with by educators who actually have some vision and some guts and aren't just playing it safe and doing what the conformity says all the time. It'll certainly cost a lot less money, and it will waste far less time on the part of students who need every moment to prepare for adulthood. If we believe that schools can be replaced by better schools through a fundamental reformation of American education, we can succeed at doing this. Love your help.